If you master the technique of making a vinaigrette, you can vary up the ingredients you use, the vinegar, the oil, the seasonings, the herbs, and then you can create dozens of dressings. And on top of it, fresh made vinaigrette can usually last up in your refrigerator in a non-reactive container for up to 2 weeks. Throw it into a mason jar and keep it in there. And remember the ratio. A vinaigrette is usually 1 part vinegar to 3 parts oil. But I also have to share with you a myth buster. There are some vinaigrettes that benefit from having different ratios. For instance, if you're using citrus, I find that sometimes you need to do more like equal parts, and some dressings actually require to use more vinegar than oil. It actually can benefit from that zing. So it really depends on what vinaigrette you're making, what vehicle you're putting it on, and you just have to go by taste. You'll notice that a lot of vinaigrettes call for extra virgin olive oil as your base and some sort of vinegar or citrus. Now, I don't have all the vinegars in the world, but I do have a good collection. And for a white vinegar, this happens to be like a white balsamic or white Modena vinegar. And white vinegar usually goes well with any kind of leafy green. So even like arugula, spring mix salad. And then you have your classic balsamic vinegar. So, balsamic vinaigrette is super popular, and that will be good on any kind of like hearty, like romaine lettuce. Red wine vinegar is good for like that zingy pop. So think like a lot of Greek or Italian salads, things with like cucumbers, tomatoes, feta, olives. Apple cider vinegar has a little bit of a fruity, sweet and tangy taste to it. So think about putting it in like summer salads that have like mayo. And rice vinegar is kind of my ultimate vinegar. I actually keep it right by my stove in one of those bottles. I like it that it's so light and it goes in a lot of Asian style dressings. Additional options are some of your lighter vinegars like champagne or sherry, because they have kind of a not so strong vinegar taste. And other options definitely include things like citrus. I usually always keep lemons and limes in my fridge all the time. The thing about citrus is that you can use not only the juice, but the zest as well. And don't forget the emulsifier, which can look like mayo, mustard, and honey. This is what combines the oil and the vinegar together, and when you whisk it, it most likely will not separate, at least not as much. So right now we're gonna make a classic vinaigrette. There's so many variations of this, but classic vinaigrettes are based off of garlic or shallot. I like to use shallot. It makes a huge difference. I feel like shallots are a little bit like a cross between onion and garlic. So you're just gonna finely mince or dice a shallot. I like to add the citrus or the vinegar, the acid, right onto the shallot because it actually mellows it out a bit. I've tried this with red wine vinegar and balsamic recently. Both are really good. Today I'm gonna go for a white. This happens to be the white balsamic vinegar or white Modena vinegar. You need 1 tablespoon for this amount. And this seems very particular because I'm measuring, but the measurements are not hard to remember. We're gonna use a 1/2 teaspoon of mayo. And you might be thinking, mayo? I wanted to keep this nice and light. Look how little this is, right? And a mayo is a natural emulsifier, and it also adds a little bit of a creaminess, a depth. Gotta shake this up. I don't like mustard juice coming out. You know what I'm talking about. We need a 1/2 teaspoon of Dijon mustard. Dijon mustard is my favorite vinaigrette ingredient. S&P, you know me. You always gotta season with salt and pepper, even if your other ingredients have flavor in it. We need about 1/8 of a teaspoon, so I'm just going to eyeball it. Kosher salt, and then some black pepper, about 1/8 of a teaspoon. Eyeball it as well. At this point, you're pretty much done with all your vinaigrette ingredients except for the olive oil. If you wanted to add a bit of sweetness, you could add a little squirt of honey. That's always good, but I'm going to show you the classic. And if I was to use something like red wine vinegar instead of the white, I would definitely suggest adding a little bit of dried oregano too. It's so good. Extra virgin olive oil makes a world of a difference in terms of flavor. I'm actually going to measure it out, 3 tablespoons. And why 3 tablespoons? Because we did 1 tablespoon of vinegar, right? 1 to 3. I'm putting it in this measuring cup because it has a spout. With a vinaigrette, you want to stream in your olive oil last, and you want to stream it in slowly. If for some reason you feel like maybe that's too much olive oil, at this point, put in a little, whisk it together and taste it. And then if you feel like it's too tangy and too sharp, you add the rest of your olive oil. That is a happy looking sauce. You can imagine that this tastes better as it sits because the shallots mellow out and they also infuse the vinaigrette itself. And if the emulsifiers weren't in here, it wouldn't stay this creamy and dreamy and put together. I'm just gonna grab a little bit of arugula, and when you dress it, you don't wanna just douse it with the vinaigrette. You wanna grab a little bit and put it along the sides of the bowl, like that. Just a little at a time because you can always add more. Gently toss it together. Just the shallots. You don't need much to make an impact. It is so simple, so delicious, and has a great depth of flavor. And you can always adjust it by adding a pop of sweetness.
Spanakopita is a dish that doesn't have that many ingredients, so each one of the ingredients gets prepared very thoughtfully. The basis of spanakopita is spinach. So don't turn your nose up at this. Spinach is really good. The problem with spinach is kind of like the problem with beets or, I don't know, maybe Brussels sprouts. If you don't have a great first experience, you're pretty much scarred for life. If you're using frozen vegetables, then all you need is 1 box of frozen spinach or 1 bag of frozen spinach. If you're using fresh spinach, use 4 bunches of spinach because they cook down to almost nothing. If you have frozen spinach, what you want to do is get as much water out of it as possible. There's actually a lot of water with frozen spinach. So you're going to let it thaw and you're going to continuously try to wring it out. Either take a kitchen towel like this, a clean kitchen towel, lay it out, put the spinach in it, close it up, and honestly wring it out like a towel, and a lot of water will come out. Or what you can do is use a bunch of paper towels. That also works as well. You end up having to scrape some of the spinach off, but that's totally fine. Put that wrung out, dried out spinach into a bowl. If you're going to cook fresh spinach, which is what we did, is you put your fresh spinach into a pan with a little bit of olive oil, start to warm it up. It'll start to wilt down. Put some fresh garlic in there. And also put maybe a little bit of onion if you like. We didn't do that with this one. What we ended up doing is keeping them separate just so we can do it all together. So take your spinach, go ahead and put it into a mixing bowl. Then comes the fun part. You get to start sort of dressing it up and seasoning it. I'm going to add about 3 cloves of garlic. You can never have too much garlic in my opinion. Don't do this on a date, but I love the garlic. Then fresh parsley. If you don't have fresh parsley, that's okay. You can also use some dried parsley. And I would say you probably want to put in about 4 teaspoons, like a tablespoon and a teaspoon works as well. Then comes the fresh dill. Oh, it's so lovely. And again, I would say about a tablespoon of fresh dill. And if you're using dried dill, you can use a little bit less than that. And then comes the salt. You don't need to use too much salt. I would say probably put about half a teaspoon of salt in, because what we're also going to do is put in some feta. The last ingredient are our scallions, our green onions. And when you're cutting them, make sure you cut them relatively thin. No one wants to bite into a large piece of scallion. And what's lovely about this as well is you can use both the white parts of the scallion and the green parts. So you're not wasting anything. And so take 3 scallions and chop them up and go ahead and add those as well. Mix this together and you'll see it's just a lot of different beautiful types of green. The next thing is you want to create a binder. So remember, we're always trying to find glue. We're trying to find something that's going to keep things together. And the binder in spanakopita is egg. So take 1 egg, break it, put it into a separate bowl because you want to sort of beat it up a little bit before you put it into your spinach. So once you've beaten that, I'm going to add that in. And using a fork, mix it into the spinach. So you can see now it's becoming a little bit more manageable, because when we start filling up our rough puff, we want to make sure that it's a consistency that's going to stick inside. My favorite ingredient is feta. So I am using here about 4 ounces, so 1/4 pound of feta. And so feta you can either buy in crumbles or you can buy it in sort of blocks or pieces. It's really a matter of preference. If you want to be super efficient, just get the crumbles and dump them right in. If you want to have a little snack for later, use these pieces. You can make these pieces relatively big. They're going to melt down a little bit, but you don't have to sort of be fussed about big or small. So once you've done that, give your mix just one other good swish, just to make sure everything is evenly distributed. You're going to be putting these into multiple pockets. So you want to, again, remember, you don't want to be the sad person that doesn't get any feta. Okay, great. So now that we have the mix, we're going to roll out our dough, cut it into pieces, and make them into folds. the first thing that I want to do is square it off. If it looks almost straight on one edge, you can just kind of like push it in a little bit. But if you have a little bit of hanging over pieces, just square them so that you can increase the likelihood that you're going to have straight lines. We're going to put 9 squares here. So I'm just going to eye it because sometimes the ruler is just about as good as your eye. And I'm going to score it. And scoring simply means you're just putting a really light line on top of the surface to give you in a direction of where you need to go when you're actually cutting. So it just makes it a little bit easier long term. And also if you score it and it's not straight, you haven't committed to a cut, so you can always go back and change it a little bit. What's that phrase? Measure twice, cut once. It's a good one. This is a sizing that I just chose, and honestly, it's arbitrary. So if you decide you want something bigger, you can do something larger. If you decide you want to do something smaller, I might caution against going too much smaller because you remember you want to have a nice ratio of dough to filling. The next thing, once we have all of our pastry cut, is to do the glue. So take the egg wash, clean silicone brush, and put some glue onto it. So you're taking the egg wash, which is 1 egg with about a tablespoon of water. Again, you can use dairy if you'd like. You can put a little heavy cream in there as well instead of the water. It's really a matter of preference. I like using water because it thins it out a little bit and it just makes it easier. You're not looking for a really thick layer here. You're just really looking for something that's going to sort of encourage the dough to seal to itself. The next step is to put the filling on top of each one of the squares. Because we're going to fold them in half, because we're going to make little triangles out of them, you want to make sure that you only fill half of each one of your little squares. So you're going to put it kind of in one area like that. Take your square and you want to fold it into a triangle. So take the end that doesn't have the filling and you want to pull it up and then slowly seal it. So you can see that I was a little bit ambitious with how much filling I put in. That's okay. Just seal it. And if a little bit sticks out, we can pull it out later. Or now. Then you can also, which one of the things that I love to do is sort of seal it up and then make it into a pocket and then pull. You can pull the dough. Remember, your dough is very malleable and it's very forgiving and very interested in making you happy. So you've got the dough, you've got it sealed up. And then another way to seal it is you want to take a fork and actually just make a little bit of a border. There we go. So that's our first one. We go into the next one. Same thing. This is a little bit less of a square, a little more of a triangle. I'm not mad about that because all that means is somebody gets a little bit more dough. So remember, there's a lot of butter in this dough. And with a lot of butter comes a lot of water because there's a lot of water in butter. And the high temperature that we're cooking these will cause all of that water to evaporate and make steam. And that's how you get your layers. But if you don't give it a steam escape, like a little slit of some kind, then it's all going to kind of like cook inside and it's going to be kind of watery and a little bit unhappy. So the goal is your food should be very happy. And for it to be happy, we need to give it a steam escape. Take a sheet tray prepared with a piece of parchment paper or with a silpat, depending on what you have or what you prefer. I love the idea of having reusable things in the kitchen. We go through so much paper and plastic in our lives. If there's any way that we can reduce that, we try to. Give the edges one more quick seal if they're trying to make a run for it. And then once you've done that, egg wash. This is just going to go very lightly across the top. And then we're going to make the steam escape. Take a sharp knife when you do that, because remember, this is a dough that's going to be a little bit soft at this point because we've been working with it for a while. And just give it a quick little incision. Doesn't have to be too big. If you want, you can also make a design. You can make a little X or something like that if you prefer. And then the final step is, remember, we're seasoning every layer, just a tiny little bit of fleur de sel. This is really more for effect than anything else. Remember, it's not going to melt, which I love. And it's going to give you a couple little crispy kernels of crunch and sort of brightness when you're biting into the spanakopita. Once they've been totally prepared, put them in the oven at 375-degree convection or 400 degrees regular oven for anywhere from 25 to 30 minutes. Keep an eye on them. Again, everyone's oven is different. You don't need to cook it for that long for the internal temperature to be okay. What you're really trying to do is get that puff and get that beautiful golden brown color. Just a pretty light golden brown, like day 1 or day 2 of your vacation, not like 1 weekend in the Bahamas, okay? These are our spanakopita. It's very warm, and you can see all these beautiful layers. It's just so luxurious and beautiful and decadent. It's just amazing. The outside is just golden brown, inside's completely cooked through, and you can see that that little steam escape, that little steam slit, has done its job. All right, you hear that? It's like shattery. It almost sounds like when you eat a croissant. It's just that beautiful shattery texture. The bottom's a little bit crispy. Oh, can't wait. Mmm, so good. Really bright. Sometimes you think it's gonna be really buttery because of the dough, but it's not. It's just the perfect casing for all of the spinach and deliciousness. I promise you, if you don't love spinach, make this. I will convert you.
Eggs en cocotte. It's kind of poached eggs, but technically not, because poached eggs are supposed to be directly in the cooking liquid. And since these are cooked in a vessel, this being a ramekin set in the cooking water, I'm classifying it as poached-esque, because the end result should be the same as a poached egg, just in a dish instead of floating around in the cooking liquid. The standard en cocotte is slightly larger than a ramekin, like you could fit 2 eggs in it, and the traditional recipe is mostly cream and cheese, and sometimes it's baked. But this is a specialty item, and I don't expect a lot of people to have this, so I'm using ramekins. And firing up the oven for just a few eggs seems like a lot of energy to use, so I'm demoing a stovetop method. First, the fun part, making your flavor combinations. Pull out every condiment and sauce you have or can think of and start creating concoctions. This was really fun to play around with. Now, I'm going to demo a few options to give you some inspiration. Every ramekin needs to be oiled with olive oil, butter, sesame oil, ghee, lard, schmaltz. It needs something. For my first combo, I'm using olive oil and leftover yogurt that's spiced with cumin and garlic. I'm covering the bottom of the ramekin with the yogurt, adding the egg, and adding more yogurt on top, and garnishing with a few capers, or more than a few capers, and grated bottarga, which is salted cured fish roe. The next one gets olive oil, mozzarella cheese, leftover sauteed mushrooms, egg, more mushrooms, and more mozzarella. My third combo starts with sesame oil, then a loose mixture of gochujang, soy sauce, and a tad more sesame oil, which really should have been toasted sesame oil, another drizzle of sesame oil. The fourth combo starts with bacon fat, then leftover mushrooms, half a slice of deli ham torn into bits and scattered around, then the egg, and I'm trying something new here. Since we always struggle with cooking the whites long enough, but then overcooking the yolks, I'm just adding the egg whites, and I'll add the yolks later in the cooking process. Then a little more ham and some Parmesan cheese. My fifth combo is lard again because it's already on the pastry brush, and then leftover caramelized onions from a pasta dish, and I'm doing the separated egg white thing again. Hopefully by now your imagination is going crazy with the combinations you can come up with for this. For the cooking technique, we'll bring about ½ inch of water to a light simmer. You'll need a pot or a pan with straight sides since we'll cover it, and you'll want enough clearance over the ramekins to keep the steam contained in the lid. I always place the ramekin in the pan while pouring the water to make sure I don't overfill it. The water levels will rise as more ramekins get added, and it shouldn't go higher than halfway up the ramekin. Bring the water to the same heat level as with any other poached egg, where you see steam and you have little bubbles breaking to the top. We'll cover the pot and let the water cook from below and the steam cook from the top. And you will actually probably hear your ramekins chattering in the pan. If you do separate the yolk from the white, add it in after just 2 to 3 minutes and add more toppings if you want, and recover. This was pretty low heat, and it took 9 minutes before I felt like the whites were cooked enough. But depending on your heat level and what's going on in your setup, check every 2 minutes. And just like with everything else, stop when it looks almost done, but not quite. And this is where I decided to stop. I'm really glad I did. It was perfect. Once one egg was firm, I knew that most all of them would be right behind it. Remember, they'll keep cooking just a little bit more even after you remove them from the pot. You'll need tongs or oven mitts to help get them out of the water. They will be very hot. The tongs were scary for me because it's not a solid grip, so I just used oven mitts. The goal is the same, cooked whites and molten yolks. So let's see how we did. Digging into the yogurt and caper combo, it is perfect. Creamy whites and molten yolks. To eat, you can dip bread into it or spoon it out and spread it on the bread. Now my gochujang overcooked. It was at the top of the pan, which always gets more heat than other parts of the cooktop. Next, the mushrooms and mozzarella. This one was watery, and I can't tell if it's an uncooked egg white or just extra water from the lid or the cheese. I'm pretty sure it's water and not egg white, simply because all the others were cooked through, although there is a possibility that the cheese was somehow thick enough to insulate the egg from cooking. So I guess keep that in mind, that if you do want to use a cheese, like a finer shredded cheese is probably better for this. Next, in the corner, the caramelized onion and Parmesan combo. This is absolutely perfect. This is one where I added the yolk a couple minutes into the cooking process. So if you're comfortable with that, the whole process of separating the yolk from the whites and then remembering to add the yolks, I say it's a winner. And yes, try this with all of the thicker sauce recipes too. And of course, the ham and mushroom also ends up being perfect because it too had its yolk added later. Now, assuming you don't have to cook anything to add to the ramekins, this comes together really quickly. And since you can use just a little bit of a lot of things, you can cook a lot of variety at one time.